Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Fred Hadley. I'm the publisher of the Village Century newsletter serving Century Village West in Boca Raton, Florida. A pronunciation tip for those watching outside Palm Beach County. It's Boca Raton, never Boca Raton. A translation tip. Boca Raton is Spanish for mouth of the mouse, not mouth of the rat, which is Boca Rata. Tonight, we are pleased to present a live stream debate over Facebook between the two candidates for District 81 State Representative, Mindy Koch and Tina Polsky, here at the Boca Lago Glades Clubhouse. The seating and questioning order was determined by a coin toss, with the winner getting to choose. At the candidate's request, once the questions begin, we ask our audience to refrain from audible reactions until the conclusion of the debate. Folks watching at home, feel free to whoop it up. Because there are no other declared candidates, all voters, regardless of party, may vote in the District 81 State Representative primary race, which is universal or open to every eligible voter. If you would like a vote by mail ballot, please call the Palm Beach County Election Supervisor's Office at 561-656-6200. That's 656-6200. At this time, I am proud to introduce our moderator, a former two-term state representative whose district included my hometown, Century Village West, the Honorable Kelly Skidmore. And yes, you may applaud now. Kelly?
Thank you so much, Fred. It's a pleasure to be here. And thanks to the Village Century for asking me to moderate and for the candidates for allowing me to be here tonight and share this night with them. The format for this evening is that each candidate will get 3 minutes for an opening statement. We'll then move straight into questions, and each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer the question with a rebuttal of 30 seconds for the candidate who was asked the question. We'll then end with 3 minutes of a closing statement. The questions have been developed by me, except for 4 of the questions, 2 each by the candidates to ask of each other. And I will let everyone know which of those questions I'm asking. So we're really looking forward to a spirited, friendly debate tonight. I'm anxious to get started. It's my great pleasure to introduce 2 exceptional candidates, 2 great choices for House District 81, Mindy Koch and Tina Polsky. Mindy won the draw and has asked to go second, so Tina, you may begin with your 3-minute opening statement.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Fred and Kelly, for hosting this debate, and thank you, Mindy, for participating. We'll get close. We're friendly. Again, I'm Tina Polsky, and I'm excited to be running for Florida House of Representatives District 81. Like so many other people, I was so fed up with what was going on in our state and federal government over the past few years that I decided enough complaining and I would take some action. So I decided to jump into the race to be the next state representative. I'm a mom of 2 teenagers. My daughter Rebecca is here, my son Jesse. They have been in the Palm Beach County schools since the beginning, and the schools are excellent, but we need to work on school funding and increase per pupil spending and raise teacher salaries. I will work passionately for those 2 issues, and I'm proud to say the Classroom Teachers Association has decided to endorse me, and so I can move forward on the very important education issues facing our county and our state. Another issue that I'm very passionate about is gun safety. Even before Parkland, when I entered the race, this was a huge issue of mine because nothing had been done at the federal level. So I entered the race, and I'm fighting very hard for gun safety issues. And I'm proud to say I'm a Moms Demand Action candidate of distinction, as well as being endorsed by the police. And we all believe that we need to ban assault weapons and other measures for gun safety. So I will fight very hard for that. The other driving issue for me is women's right to choose. I am very concerned that at the federal level we will be losing that right if the Supreme Court turns. So the states must take action. And I'm very proud to say that I'm endorsed by the National Organization for Women. That is one of their main platforms. I've been married for 22 years to my wonderful partner in life and the campaign, Jeff, who's over there. I went to the University of Pennsylvania undergrad and Columbia Law School. I practiced law in New York. We moved to Florida 13 years ago. I became a certified mediator. And what I do is help parties who can't get along. We figure out a resolution to their issues and we find common ground. I believe that those skills will serve me very well in the legislature, which is hyper-partisan, as we all know. I have been very involved in the community over the last 13 years. I'm very proud to work with the Anti-Defamation League and the Civil Rights Committee, work with foster children at Best Foot Forward, Alzheimer's Association, and many other charities involving children and women. I am very proud that I've worked so hard across this campaign to meet with every elected official that I could possibly meet with in this district and beyond. And I'm so proud of the endorsements that I've been able to get because they believe in me as the next best choice to be representative in this district. I want to thank in particular some of the endorsements, Congressman Ted Deutsch, Congressman Alcee Hastings, State Senator Kevin Rader, thank you very much for being here, Kevin, State Senator Lori Berman, and the current seat holder, Joseph Abruzzo, who has been a remarkable representative for our district, and I hope to follow in his footsteps. I've been working very hard to get out the vote. I hope to get your vote. We've had a great positive reaction, and I hope to be your next state representative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tina. Mindy, your 3-minute opening statement begins now.
My name is Mindy Koch, and I'm a retired teacher. I retired after 40 years in the classroom and administrating special education programs. I'm also the president of the Palm Beach County, of the Boca Delray Democratic Club, and I'm a precinct leader in a precinct very nearby here. I've been involved in politics for over 30 years. Unfortunately for my children and my family, they have all suffered through this with me. I've helped elect Democrats in this district and in this state up and down the ballot. One of them is sitting in this room today. As you know, I'm running for House District 81, and I've canvassed this district up and down. They tell me that their concerns are for education, making sure we fully fund education, and to make sure we have safe schools for our children. It's very important to them. They're also very angry that we did not take the Medicaid expansion. And since we are the Sunshine State, they can't figure out why we don't have solar energy as our primary energy source. It creates jobs, it puts money into the state treasury, high-paying jobs, by the way, and puts money in the treasury, and will create tremendous amounts of revenue. And finally, our seniors, who want to be considered first and not last. I just have to say that we all know that the endorsement process here in Palm Beach County is flawed. It's not who you know, it's who you know, not what you know. Fred, thank you so much for inviting us. This is going to be a wonderful opportunity to tell people in the district what we think. I've been preparing for this job my entire life. Thank you. Where do I put this?
All right, thank you so much. We're going to start question 1, which we'll start with Tina. Florida's stand your ground law is in the news again for a recent shooting over the use of a disabled parking spot. The Pinellas County Sheriff is insisting the law prohibits him from arresting the shooter, but even some Republican lawmakers are disputing that interpretation. What is your position on the current law, and what would you change if you could?
Thank you, Kelly. My position is that I disagree completely with the stand your ground law. And I'm glad you mentioned that some Republican lawmakers are against it, and I see a real opportunity in the next session based on the ridiculousness of the particular, based on the ridiculousness of the particular case that just happened. It was so extreme that I think this is an opportunity to get some bipartisan support to get rid of that law. I think it leads to discriminatory practices, and it's happened quite often that it's a white person shooting a black person and the white person is not charged. In that particular case in Pinellas County, there was no reason why that man was facing any kind of imminent threat, which the law was designed to do. I think the law is flawed to begin with, but even if you did apply the law, I don't think that this particular case fitted from what I saw in the video. So I would strongly be in favor of repealing that law.
Thank you very much. Maybe, shall I repeat the question, or you?
No, I can.
Thank you.
The Castle Doctrine makes a great deal of sense, I think. And I think many people agree with me that if you're attacked in your home, you should be able to defend yourself from the attacker. The problem is this was out in the street, and the stand your ground legislation has kind of gotten carried away with itself. It's almost frightening to think that you could be driving down the street and someone doesn't like the way your hair looks and they decide they're going to shoot you. This is really bad, and then they can claim they were just standing their ground, that I made them frightened. And it does need to be repealed, and hopefully, there's no guarantee of this, but there is conversation on the opposite side that they may consider changing or repealing the stand your ground law totally, and I would certainly support that.
Thank you so much. Tina, do you have a rebuttal?
No.
Good, thank you. Question 2. What or who do you think is responsible for the toxic algae bloom and resulting red tide blanket of death that is infesting waterways from South Florida to Southwest Florida, jeopardizing the state's tourism industry? What would you do to address this problem and or prevent it from happening in the future?
Am I first on all the questions?
I'm sorry, that was to Mindy.
Okay.
Sorry, Mindy, that was to you.
You know, we have such a scarce amount of we have a lot of fresh water in Florida, but the fresh water is getting polluted by the red tide and the green algae and all of those above things. One of the things that failed to happen recently, that the Republican legislature has repealed in the state of Florida, was some of the EPA regs that were used at the federal level. And those regulations called for a decrease in nitrogen and monitored what was going into our waterways. The other thing we had in Florida that was cut by this current gubernatorial administration was the fact that they monitored septic tanks. And it's really important to do that because part of this is due to septic tank discharges. We really need to reinstate the EPA regs. We really need to reinstate our sanitation patrol that used to check on all the septic tanks. I know there are other solutions, but being a classroom teacher and not a scientist, I kind of leave it to them.
Thank you. Tina, shall I repeat the question?
No.
Okay.
Thank you. It seems that the problems are existing throughout the whole state of Florida, even all the way up in Jacksonville. So something's going on. I agree that the current administration's lack of inspection of septic tanks and other water management administration that has been cut has been a large cause of the algae blooms and problems that we're having with the water. You asked how we would fix it. The key to that is getting a coalition of as many people involved as possible. The environmental groups, the government agencies, the people who own the land, the scientists. We have to get everyone together, and I think the most important thing is we don't play the blame game. And I think a lot of politicians are doing that in order to curry favor, but there's no one in particular to blame. It's a group problem that has been created by the state, and we need to fix it. So I think the most important thing is to try to build consensus put as much money into it as we can spare, because a lot of money was taken out of the monitoring programs, and do what we can. We have to apply science. Science is always the key. No more climate change denying. We have to come to terms with science, use the scientists, use the money we have, get a coalition, and get everyone together and solve this problem once and for all.
Thank you, Joe.
No.
Question 3 is submitted by Tina to Mindy. You stated in an interview to the Palm Beach Post that you don't see a path to agree with the Republicans in the House. You also stated at the DEC forum that you will be a loud voice on the back bench. How do you intend to get measures passed being in the minority party, given this extreme partisan approach?
The Democratic Party is almost a super minority. We have spent the last 20 years fighting the good fight. It is impossible to, the Republicans have one thing in mind, and it's not compromise, and it's not talking to us, and it's not any of those things. And I will seek out people who may want to talk about different issues in Florida, because that's how we can do it. We can't do it by telling them. We can't do it by, I will be a very loud voice in the backbench, because that's where we sit. And that's our place of honor. And at the end of the day, we need to find some issues upon which we can agree and attack those issues instead of trying to find compromise with them, because I don't think they're willing to compromise.
Do you have a rebuttal?
Yes, I'm very concerned about the attitude of they're not willing to compromise. We have to work with these people. We are in the minority. They're not all evil, and there is a lot of common ground that can be found. As a mediator, I believe I have the skills to do the best that we can to find that common ground. I have also spent a lot of time out in this district meeting with many different kinds of people, different persuasions, and there is a lot of common ground, and I feel that I've built those relationships where we can get to compromise, and I think it's very important that we start with a more open attitude towards getting democratic values passed.
Okay. Question 4, submitted by Mindy to Tina. We all know there's a patchwork of policies in Florida to, quote, ban the box, end quote. What would you do to make this a statewide law?
Ban the box?
Ban the box is an initiative to eliminate the checkbox on employment applications for whether you've been arrested or convicted, or the information that I looked at said 1 in 4 adults in the U.S. have been arrested, including 3 million in Florida, and Florida denies felons the restoration of their rights. So ban the box is an initiative that it is a patchwork. It's a good word to explain it. Different counties and cities have adopted different policies. So I think the question is, what would you do to make it a statewide law?
Sure. I believe very strongly in the Felons' Rights Restoration Amendment. And not only will it give felons the opportunity to vote, but it will also give them the opportunity to perhaps have their record expunged so that they can apply for a job. I've been working in the employment field for a long time in employment law and human resources, so I'm very familiar with employment applications and have a very strong background in that area. And I think it's very important that felons who have paid their price and who have gone through the process be given the opportunity to apply for a job and not have that terrible mark on their record. So I am in favor of those kinds of regulations, or eliminating those laws so that people are allowed to, again, vote, very important, and have all their rights restored, one of which is have the ability to apply for a job.
When we restored felon rights with the Fourth Amendment, the natural and logical second step, and in the articles that I read recently, is that people across the aisle are willing to work with this, is to ban the box. It is a tremendously restrictive thing, and it creates more recidivism among our felon population, and it stops them from resuming their position in society, and I hope we can end that.
Okay. Tina, 18% of Florida's $82.5 billion budget is dedicated to public education, including $140 million for the Schools of Hope charter school program that was passed this last session. What is your position on charter schools, and what would you propose differently for children who attend persistently low-performing schools or those who don't succeed in traditional public schools, if anything?
I think the most important thing is that we get as much funding as possible for public education. The problem has been that the charter schools have been taking more and more of the funding. At first it just started as per pupil, but then it became building and construction, and that took away from schools that are physically failing, that needed repairs. So that's been a problem. One of my biggest problems with charter schools is that the people who vote on it, some of them have conflicts of interest, and they are involved financially in charter schools, or their family members are. Therefore, I don't know how they can make a fair decision when there's a financial element involved and the charter schools are for-profit institutions. The state of Florida is in the business of public education, and that should be our first priority all the time. If there are special needs, special areas that need charter schools, that can be looked at, but it's just gotten out of control. And unfortunately, from the legislators that I've spoken to and learned from in this process, it seems to be the Republican agenda to promote charter schools and create a failing system for public schools. It seems that they want the public schools to fail, and that can't be the way forward for our public school students. We are at the bottom of every survey for teacher salaries, per pupil spending, and overall quality. And that is not acceptable in the third largest state. So we have to focus on public schools, and if there's a need for charter schools in certain areas, then we can look into it. But we cannot take away what we need. And raising teacher salaries is essential. Florida is so low, it's like half of other states. So we have to do what we can to get the best and the brightest teachers here, keep them employed for more than a few years, and spend more on our pupils. I'm out of time. Thank you.
Ask me one more thing, please.
Okay. 18% of Florida's $82.5 billion budget is dedicated to public education, including $140 million for the Schools of Hope charter school program, which passed this past session. What is your position on charter schools, and what would you propose differently for children who attend persistently low-performing schools, which is what the Schools of Hope was supposed to address, or those who don't succeed in traditional public schools, if anything?
I think charter schools is one of the most detrimental things happening in our public sector today. Spending money that should go to all of Florida's children equally in public school is the way to go. Here's my solution to solving the problem of low-performing schools. The testing that we do just makes test makers very wealthy. It doesn't really tell us, although we need some kind of accountability, the testing that we're using today is not a foolproof evaluation system and doesn't really evaluate our children and our schools in any way, manner, shape, or form. When you are told that you are in an F school, you really kind of feel that you should give up. The grading system also should be extinguished. The charter schools were set up to serve one purpose, and that was to provide something that the public sector couldn't do. For example, South Tech here in Delray Beach that is a trades vocational school, and they teach all the trades. And that's a wonderful opportunity for our students, and actually very expensive. So it's great that we have that opportunity for our kids. But many of our charter schools, like the Eagle Academy, continue to perform when they don't even pay their teachers and continue to get money from the school district. It's something that we should really think about getting rid of and making sure that the charter schools meet the needs of the students instead of the owners of the charter.
Rebuttal?
No.
Okay, moving on. Mindy. Reproductive health care, including access to abortion, preventative screenings, and contraception, as well as the continuation of Planned Parenthood funding or the implementation of age-appropriate sex ed in schools, is often a vitriolic dividing line for political parties. Where, if anywhere, are you willing to compromise with your political opponents on this overarching issue?
If the Supreme Court is filled the way people say it will be, then we have to be very mindful of what happens to women's rights here in Florida. In almost every legislative session, they produce a bill that restricts women's access to health care. And I'm not sure that that is a very good thing. Is there compromise? I'm not sure about that either. I do believe abortion should be legal, accessible, and extremely rare. Maybe we can agree on that. Women's health care should be left to a woman and her doctor, not the state, not a courtroom, but a woman and her doctor. And I truly, absolutely, I believe that since 1972.
Can you just repeat the whole question? Thank you.
Sure. Reproductive health care, including access to abortion, preventative screenings, and contraception, as well as the continuation of Planned Parenthood funding or the implementation of age-appropriate sex education in schools, is often a vitriolic dividing line for political parties. Where, if anywhere, are you willing to compromise with your political opponents on this overarching issue?
We have to take steps to proactively protect a woman's right to choose. That right could very much be in jeopardy, and then the easy way out is they will leave it to the states. So our state, which has been traditionally not as liberal, we need to make sure that a woman's right to choose is protected. That's going to be a very difficult issue to compromise on, and it's going to be hard to do that if the Republican Party refuses to compromise on that. But I'm not sure that every Republican agrees with that, so hopefully there will be some common ground. Planned Parenthood must be funded. It is not appropriate to have women going there for health care and not be reimbursed by Medicaid. So we have to make sure that happens. Again, it might be a little difficult to compromise, but I believe that in the overall healthcare scheme that hopefully we can keep moving through, that might be a part of it that we can add on. As far as sexual education in schools, maybe that's an area that we can compromise. I think that's, in the scheme of things, less important than the other two. So if that's required for compromise, we can, but I do strongly believe that it's important to educate our students as much as we can on health, on reproductive health, on sexual practices, safe sex, etc. So I think we're in agreement as Democratic women that these are issues that we are going to fight for as hard as we can and compromise where we can, but some things we have to be steadfast about.
Thank you. Yes, the answer was nowhere. Okay, question from Tina to Mindy. One of the key arguments you make for your candidacy is that you have worked within the Democratic political structure, whereas your opponent is a political newcomer. Can you explain to voters why 26 current and former elected officials, who should know you better than they know your opponent, have all endorsed her?
I think I addressed that a little while ago when we talked about endorsements. I do know that originally Tina ran in House District 89, and from previous experience, I know that when members of the legislature have endorsed candidates, they usually don't change in midstream. So really, at that point, when I came into the race, which was, I thought, pretty reasonable, in the end of March, I had spoken to some of them, and they said, oh no, we've already endorsed. So I thought that was very interesting. I don't know what their reason is. I do know that the endorsement process is quite flawed. I would suggest, and when I'm elected and become a legislator, if there is someone running that I would like to talk to and endorse, perhaps, I will not do it until the filing deadline, because that's what's fair to everyone. But the endorsement procedure is who you know, not what you know. And sometimes it's the fact that you were declared your candidacy in another race.
Tina, rebuttal?
I think the important thing about the endorsements is the effort that I put in to meet every elected official that I possibly could in this district and beyond. There are people I met who have not spoken to my opponent ever, that if elected, I will have to work with in important areas like the Glades. And so it's important to establish those relationships even prior to hopefully becoming elected. So I worked extremely hard to meet with these people, learn from them. As both being new, it's important that we learn from the current legislators. And they believe, from speaking to me and knowing my story, that I would be the better candidate.
Okay, thank you. Question to Tina from Mindy. What in your background prepared you to be a state legislator?
Thanks, Mindy. That was a great question. I think being a lawyer, being a strong student, studying as hard as I have, analyzing documents and both sides of an argument in law school and practicing as an attorney. My background in business and law is very varied and interesting, and I think that that gives me a great wide perspective to be able to represent the many varied people of District 81. And as I've mentioned a few times, being a mediator gives me the skills to help negotiate. We've talked about how difficult it is to be in the minority party. I've been able to build relationships with people across the spectrum of this district. And I think when a difficult issue comes up, I'll be able to call on those relationships and ask them to come to the table so that we can get something accomplished. So I think my just general background is I've done many different things, my charitable involvements, my community service, my leadership in various organizations gives me, I think, a very good background for a first-time candidate to be a state legislator.
Sure. So many times Tina has mentioned mediation, and so here's what I think. I think peace and love was great in the 60s, but today there's a war on facts. Until the legislature can arrive at an agreed upon set of facts, mediation is useless, and the supermajority will always prevail. This district really needs leadership.
Okay. Back to me. So this is an aspirational question, and having served in the legislature, something that I dreamed about. If you could be Speaker of the House, particularly since a woman has never held that position in the history of statehood, what would top your agenda, And what would be your strategy for implementing your priorities within the majority as well as the minority caucuses? And Tina, you start.
If I could be speaker, well, I do not have those aspirations. I'd like to just get through this campaign and see what happens. But I am excited to hopefully be the next representative and learn as much as I can. No thoughts of leadership at all. However, since you asked, from what I understand, since obviously I haven't been there before, that there is hyperpartisanship. And there is some, shall we say, revenging or grudges or kind of holding people's feet to the fire to go with the agenda of the majority party. So I would hope if I were speaker as a Democrat in a make-believe world that we would have peace and love and kumbaya, and that we would be able to get along and just focus on the issues and not be so focused on partisanship. From what I've heard, it's been very difficult to do that in the past, and I think that if you set the tone, just like our president sets a certain tone and the citizens react, I think if we set the tone, if I were the leader and set the tone, I would expect the legislators to react in a way and behave in a way that we can get along. From what I understand also from speaking to so many legislators is that 98% of the issues are resolvable and are kind of smaller issues, like one business versus another business, one business dealing with certain kinds of regulation that the citizens don't know about, don't care about, that mostly people do get along. It's these kind of big issues that we have these big fights about that get so much more attention. So I think a lot does get done, but I would like to set a different tone if I were ever to be speaker.
Maybe I'm going to repeat the question just to make sure. If you could be Speaker of the House, what would top your agenda and what would be your strategy for implementing your priorities within the majority as well as the minority caucuses? You have 2 minutes.
2 minutes. In my opinion, so much angst in the Florida legislature stops things from happening. And if I were queen, I would make sure public schools were fully funded. I think I would convince my Republican brothers across the aisle that that was a good thing because public education is the great equalizer we all know. I would find a way to create jobs here in Florida. It's so important that we find a way to create high quality, high paying jobs here in Florida. And I think they could agree with me on that as well because everybody wants to do well. I would love to have affordable housing in our state that's much more available than it is today. And I would do those kinds of things if I were queen for a day. I would also make sure that women's rights were protected. I would make sure maybe we would even roll back the stand your ground law. I would also do something, seriously do something, about sea level rise and the effects of it here in the state of Florida. Because that's going to, if we don't have a peninsula to live on, we might as well just pack it up now. And that's a lot. Thanks for asking. That's such a good question.
Tina, rebuttal?
No.
Okay. In March of this year, this is from Mindy, Governor Scott signed a law that allows members of the legislature, among others, to make surprise inspections of juvenile detention centers after a Miami Herald expose uncovered shocking details about a fight club culture supported by facility staff members, including those at the Palm Beach Juvenile Correctional Facility in West Palm Beach. Would you make it a practice to inspect these facilities? Why or why not?
Yes, I absolutely would. Just because you've broken the law and are incarcerated for a period of time does not mean we get to treat you inhumanely. It's our responsibility as and loco parenti, I assume, of those children to make sure that their needs are met, that they are not abused, and that they are educated and well cared for.
Thank you. Do you want me to repeat the question?
No, thank you. I think inspections are always a good idea in every category that the government can inspect. And surprise inspection is even better because then they're not prepared for it. So I certainly agree that surprise inspections in juvenile detention centers is a great idea, especially because there have been so many problems. I have an uncle who is a lawyer who has fought for prison reform all over the country, so I understand how important it is for prisoners to be treated humanely and the conditions to be appropriate, and we've all been made aware of detention centers over the last several months and the horrible conditions that some of these children are in. So the least we can do is take care of juveniles who are in detention in our state and make sure that they have the best care that they can have, and give them an opportunity to rehabilitate in the right kind of atmosphere. And if inspections help that process along, then I'm for it.
Okay. Mindy, you mentioned a moment ago that education is the great equalizer. I agree with that, but I also think public transportation is the next great equalizer. And the state of Florida has done little to support public transportation in a state that is sprawling. What is your position on transportation in the state of Florida? And that can include Tri-Rail, Brightline, any other opportunities that you can think of. What are the solutions that will help us get out of gridlock and help working people who can't afford vehicles and insurance and gas and all of those things get to where they need to go to support their families?
Here in Boca, we have a traffic issue. And the traffic issue comes from a lack of, in my opinion, public transportation and a lack of affordable housing. So it kind of goes to me hand in hand. I think it was a very big mistake for the governor to decline to accept the stimulus money to build the bullet train that we all voted yes on the amendment for the bullet train. You guys remember that? They just said, no, we're not doing that. We're going to do it privately. So we have a private Brightline, which hopefully will extend further than West Palm Beach and further than Fort Lauderdale. And that may help us. I think we need more buses on the roads that have more stops so that it's more convenient for people to ride. Having the Glades as part of the district, wouldn't it be amazing if we put an overland rail from West Palm Beach with a stop at the Publix on Southern Boulevard out to the Glades? And that would maybe relieve some of the 22% unemployment out there. Yeah. We have to do something here in Florida because we're running out of land to build highways, and we have to convince people that this is a convenient and smart thing to do. And we have to make sure it's funded both at the city, the county, and the state level, because it won't happen otherwise.
Tina?
I had the opportunity to visit Brightline, and just a correction, it does go down to Miami. It stops only in West Palm, Fort Lauderdale, and Miami. So it's a little hard for us who live in Boca Raton. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but they decided that that would be too many stops and it wouldn't be as express. It's a fantastic facility, and I think that's a great example of private sector coming in where the public sector does not. And it's really advanced and a very cool experience. I encourage everyone to go see it. So that's a great first step, and I know they will be expanding to Tampa and Orlando, so that would be very helpful. We do have a public transportation problem. No one seems to take the buses or the trains, and we need to make it more accessible for people so that we do get some of the congestion off the streets. off the highways. There always seems to be construction. I'm happy to see that they've increased the HOV lanes. I personally drive a hybrid, so I enjoy using those HOV lanes. It's gone further into Fort Lauderdale, so it's easier to get into Miami. But there's a lot that we can do. I agree we should accept whatever federal money is available for us to provide for it. I think it's also a cultural issue here. You know, I'm from New York, so I'm used to public transportation, but it's just not the culture here. So we have to do what we can to change the culture, perhaps incentivize people to use public transportation, but make it more accessible to, like out here in the West, we're pretty far from Tri-Rail. So there has to be some things we can do, and I'm sure if we put some studies to it and some little money and some brains behind it, we can come up with some solutions.
The bright line that seems to me to be the issue, it has 3 stops. Who's going to ride it to go 3 stops if you have to go to work? Maybe you work in Fort Lauderdale and you live in Miami, then it's great. But if you live in Lantana and you have to go to Boca, then it doesn't help you very much. So we need to provide access to transportation. And then we have to convince people that that's what they should do.
Very good. Well, thank you for answering these questions, and thank you for submitting your questions. We're now going to move to your closing statements, and you each have 3 minutes. And Tina, we will start with you.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you, Kelly, for the debate. Fred did a fantastic job. Kelly, great questions. Mindy, thank you so much for participating and for keeping this all so nice and calm and civil. I know some other races aren't quite that way, right, Ryan? So I'm very happy to be, I think all through this campaign, truly, it's been very civil and calm, and I appreciate that very much. There's a very simple question here for the voters in District 81. It's very clear that Mindy and I agree on almost every issue. Not too many rebuttals. We're both Democratic women who believe in basic democratic values. The question is, who would be a more effective legislator? And that's for the voters to decide. I believe that I would be the more effective legislator. I think I've demonstrated that with the endorsements, not only the elected officials, who have a wide variety of folks who have done that, but also the organizations. There have been, across the board, Human Rights Council on one side, very progressive, business groups on the other side, very conservative. I've learned so much from all of these groups. It's been a great education. I have sought out all of the ones that I could because it's my opportunity to learn. Why would I turn down any opportunity to speak to an organization and possibly earn their endorsement? So that's what I've done. And I have many who have decided to choose me. And that gives me just great honor, and I feel blessed and very pleased that they believe in my candidacy. I guess the crowning jewel was the Sun Sentinel. And what happened there was my opponent and I did a joint interview before reporters and editorial board. And based on the interview and based on looking at the race overall and our backgrounds, they decided that I would be a very effective legislator, that I would use the relationships that I've created to get our democratic values passed in Tallahassee. So I'm very honored by that. But what that says to me is that the community as a whole has embraced me and believes that I would be an effective legislator. And I think the things we talked about so far, my background, just to clarify something about mediation, it's not just about peace and love. It's about moving parties much further than they ever thought they could move. When I do these mediations, parties are hundreds of thousands of dollars apart. Or it's a family in crisis with a senior citizen and they hate each other. But we come to a resolution about moving forward. And that's what I do for work, and that's what I would love to do to work for our district. I have worked extremely hard in this campaign. As I said, I've crossed every area of this district, met with so many organizations. I will work just as hard to be your representative. I will work just as hard to get your vote. I promise to study hard, work hard, if I am lucky enough to be your state representative for District 81. Thank you.
Mindy, that's my turn. Thank you all so much for coming tonight and listening to this in person. Thank you, Kelly. You were great, the great questions, and Fred for doing this. And Tina, of course, who we should be friends very well because we meet each other all the time. And that's what this is about. That's what an election is about. It is about who you will choose to take your concerns forward. The difference between Tina and I in this election is not necessarily what we believe or what we think, but I am the grassroots candidate. I have walked this district from Boca Raton up to the Glades. No, I haven't walked from here to the Glades, but I have walked most neighborhoods here in Boca, and the district goes into Delray and Boynton and Lake Worth. And so I've done all that and met lots and lots and lots of voters. This sounds really bad, Fred. I'm the best informed of the two of us. I only have one group of persons to answer to, and that will be the voters and my constituents in this district. I know my constituents because I'm one of them. My name is once again Mindy Koch, and I'm running for House District 81. Please vote on August 28th. Don't forget, you guys. And also, send in your absentee ballot. Thanks, Fred.
Mindy?
Okay.
Did they catch the handshake?
Okay, this concludes this concludes our debate. Thank you, candidates. Let's have a big round of applause for Mindy Koch and Tina Polsky. And I especially want to thank. All right. I want to thank our Kelly Skidmore. I'm sorry, we're having a little camera problem here, for doing her usual professional job of moderating, and a special thanks to our timekeeper Melissa Gorkin. Thanks to Facebook, which, for all of its shortcomings, has democratized video distribution by permitting anyone with a smartphone to become a broadcaster. Remember to vote for the candidate of your choice, either by mail or during early voting from August 13th through August 26th at your precinct's polling place from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Thank you to the spectators for coming and maintaining decorum, and thanks to those of you at home watching either live or on demand over Facebook. This is Fred Hadley, publisher of the Village Century newsletter, reporting live from Boca Raton in beautiful, sunny Palm Beach County in the great state of Florida. Once again, let's have a big hand for everybody. Thank you all.